It's good to have you with us here on Marriage Talk. Thank you for subscribing and for listening, and hopefully sharing the link with other married couples in your world. Throughout your church, for instance, would be a pretty good place to start. Bill Hobson here, along with Jay and Laura Laffoon. You can find out lots of information on their ministry at jayandlaura.com. And you can also go to marriagetalk.org for all of the links to all of the things we talk about, as well as previous episodes and our YouTube channel. Every episode that we're sharing with you in audio form is also in video form. So if you want to see how Jay and Laura dress for a podcast, this would be the time to just go to the YouTube channel and you can check it out for yourself. Today it's what we would call late fall chic, because it's
That's right.
a little chilly out. I don't know where you are or when you're listening to this, but it's a little cold here in the great state of Michigan as we sit down.
A little snow in the air.
A little bit of flaky. There's very little golf in the air, which is a
That's right.
sore spot for all of us. But today we turn our attention to this never-ending dynamic of finding the proper balance between our work, our vocation, and our marriage relationships, and trying not to let the work side of life dominate the relationship side of life. So, Jay and Laura, why don't you kind of start us off down the pathway and we'll take off from there.
Well, it's interesting, Bill, because I think most folks fall into a number of categories. A lot of folks are blessed in that when they leave their place of work, they can leave it at work and they don't bring it home. Unfortunately, a lot of those people are also not happy with work, so they're bringing a disgruntledness home, and so work follows them even though they don't realize it's work. Then there are folks like Laura and I who work out of our home, and those, depending on your personality, that can become a problem of becoming a workaholic, that all you do is work and sit in your desk or your little home office and scribe away or do whatever it is you do. And
I think there's also people, though, that they do get to leave their home for work, but they have a time-consuming job. So that when they're home, they're not really home. They're still, the phone may ring, you may get a text, you may get whatever.
Or they bring it home because they didn't get it done in the 8 to 5. And then the final category that I see are those people who travel. That is a really, really unique situation. And we've got a number of illustrations we'll talk about there, just not only from our own life, but from friends who battle this distance, because I'm on the road. So technically I'm working, but I'm off right now, but we're not together. And how do we manage that? And so we'll talk about these different areas and how to balance that, because it really is a balancing act no matter what category you fall into.
Do you see many examples of work being the justified excuse for avoiding my relationship, for shutting down or compartmentalizing away from the time that I should be spending with my family? So work gets the blame for it, even though it's kind of being used as a weapon?
I think there's a mentality out there, and I don't want to generalize and say it's mostly men, but I'm providing for my family.
Yeah.
Which is what God called me to do.
God called me to do. So my job kind of is equal with my family because I'm providing for them by doing this. So when I answer a text at home or have to finish my emails when I get home, or I'm home, I get home late every night, there's that, but I'm providing for my family. This is what I have to do to make sure that you all,
if you want all these nice things,
you want all this, you want all the kids to do their dance, their soccer, well, it takes me having to pay for it. Now that's assuming that the wife doesn't work, too. And then that's when you get a whole new, that you both have full-time jobs and you still have kids and you have kids activities, and that's where the imbalance really gets difficult, in that you've got 2 jobs and 2 people who have 2 separate kinds of jobs, and you still got to take care of kids and you still got to get stuff done at home. And that's where the imbalance really
the other excuse that we hear is this: well, my spouse knew how important my career was when we got married, that this is my career. They knew that. And I even heard that spoken, a pastor speaking that my spouse knew what they were getting into. Well, No. We understand that, your calling is important.
You get married, you don't know what you're getting into.
That's right.
I mean, you can do the job.
But, those people who put their career, because they've been thinking about their career since high school, since college, whatever, this is my dream of who I am, rather than thinking about the dream of who we can be. And I think that really is dangerous when we put ourselves and our careers in front of our relationship.
It is a tightrope to walk at times. There is a validity to the argument that I have to do these things in order to provide for my family, but there are still opportunities to draw boundaries in all of this work-related stress and the demands on your schedule. My experience has been, and I should preface this by saying that it has been, oh my goodness, probably 20 years since I worked for somebody else. All right. So I discovered something about me. I was a lousy employee. Just really was. I just wanted to make all the decisions. I always wanted to be in charge. And I probably wasn't a very good employee. So to any of my former bosses that are listening, my apologies. I probably wasn't very good at it. But having said that, one of the things that that you come to realize is that if you are open to the idea of work dominating your life, work will always dominate your life. It's not like your employer it's very rare that your employer is going to pull you aside and go, Bill, I think you've been working a little bit too hard recently. Why don't you cut back a little bit? You're helping the company a little bit too much. That's pretty rare. Maybe in a ministry setting where they have their heads on straight, they will do that if somebody's overdoing it. But like I said, it's like Halley's Comet. You're going to see that about once every 46 years. So let's get into some boundary setting and how that can not only protect the individual, but also protect their marriage in setting apart time where work is not allowed in.
Right. I think you have to, obviously, this is where the communication comes in very heavily. You have to sit down as a husband and wife and draw the boundaries. You have to, based on each other's, and to be, Laura, that's just so not efficient. Well, it may not be efficient, but it's effective. And to sit down and say, I'll give you this illustration, because we do have an office in our home. And we have an office in our home because when our daughter was very, very young, we did have an office in our home, but it took over the whole living room. And when you have a 1-year-old, she was getting into all of Jay's office stuff. And he said, I either need to get an office downtown, or I need to get a house where we have an office in the house. So our office here in the house is above the garage, and you can access it through the main house. And it's very hard for him. I have to tell him, at 5 o'clock or 5:30, we agree every day. We make a schedule every day as to when are we done working today based on what we have to do. And when we're done, that door gets shut. And that's the boundary, is the door is shut. Now, with the onset of phones and iPads and stuff like that, he could still check his email and I would never know. And he does. But, you have to set those boundaries, but they have to be agreed upon by each other so that it's fair and balanced based on what your job, if you have, we have friends who he's a doctor. And if he gets called into an emergency, he has to go no matter the time of day or night. And that is a job that when he's home, he's home. But if he gets called in, it doesn't matter. And so those boundaries are a little different than our boundaries.
Right. And I think I'm going to, Laura, you used this word. I'm going to repeat it. Some people don't like it, but it's the word, what's fair? What is a fair expectation for your time at work? What is a fair expectation for your time with the family? Because life isn't fair. Okay, let's just be right up front. It's not. But when you're talking about working things out here at home, is it fair for me to say I'm going to work till 9 o'clock every night? No, because that robs time from my wife, from my kids. Give you a perfect example. Laura and I are working this weekend. And so we said, this is one of the things we always do. What's our day off this week? If we're working the weekend, what's our day off? And so we said, we're going to take Friday off. Well, I just got a request for a phone appointment on Friday. And before I said yes to it, I said, Laura, here's who it is. And here's the only time that he can meet this week. I can push it to next week. And she said, no, take that. Thank you for honoring our agreement of this. But I think that's an important phone call that you need to take this week. So working it out, because normally I would just take it and not tell her. And here we've been married almost 40 years, and we're marriage, that's on the forefront of our minds all the time. And a lot of times my personality would go, I've already made this decision. I don't need to hear from her. No, it's honoring to her. It's honoring to our relationship. Yes. Did it take an extra 3 minutes and 20 seconds for me to wait to be able to talk to her about it? Yes, it did. But those 3 minutes and 20 seconds spoke volumes to her when I said, I know we've talked about Friday being our day off, but here's the only time this guy can talk. And so it really is what's fair, what is equitable. And again, it depends on the type of job that you have.
And what your family makeup is. Do you have young children? Or do you have teenagers? All of those factors play into, and they're going to change with seasons of life. What your boundaries might be as a husband and wife who have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old is going to be very different than when you're husband and wife and you have a 14 and a 15-year-old. And then even when you're empty nesters, the seasons of life change, those boundaries change with the seasons of life. And that's why you have to start communicating about them early on, so that you're used to communicating about it as those seasons of life change and you move into new seasons.
The other thing, go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say there are a couple of different variations on the theme of bringing work home with me. In some cases, for some of our listeners, it literally means they've got unfinished projects that they are putting into a satchel or a duffel bag or a briefcase and literally bringing home the spreadsheets, and they're working on it at the kitchen table. But there's also the definition, which is emotionally and mentally, I'm bringing home the baggage from my workday, from the stress of getting scolded by my manager, by learning that we're all on the precipice of being laid off, or that there's pay cuts coming, or all those things that are weighing on us when we come home. What do we do with that when it comes to the work and marriage balance? How much of that is appropriate to bring home to our spouse, or at what point does it become, oh, what happened now? Oh man, I had this beautiful dinner laid out and we were going to do this and have this great time, and now I'm just going to get dumped on again because old man Smithers is treating my wife poorly, or whatever it is. So
Right.
What do we do with when we bring work home in either of those two definitions?
Well, I would say I'll address the one where you bring home the emotional baggage, because we are on staff at a church for 10 hours a week each, men's, women's, and marriage and family ministry. And of course, 10 hours a week was not even remotely close to what it really was. And I could not counsel with people, because I would come home and everything that I had just heard, I couldn't let it go. I was devastated. I was, oh my gosh, I can't believe what they're going through. Oh my goodness. I wish I could help them. Oh my goodness. And it became very much a burden for our marriage. And I just couldn't cope. In fact, I asked our friend, Dr. Gary Chapman, 5 Languages of Love, how did you do that? And he said, because that's what he did. He said, the first 3 years of my ministry, I couldn't. He said, but then I saw the toll it was taking on my wife and my children. And I said to the Lord, either you help me figure out how to take this away so I can go home and be with them, or I'm going to have to quit doing this. And he said the Lord miraculously gave him, a dose of grace to say, okay, when you leave, when you hear that door shut, your mind has to shut off. And so I think that's the hard one for me.
And it's different for every personality.
Yeah.
I maybe I'm just hard-hearted. Jay would say yes, because I turn that stuff off. When we're done working, I'm done working. I am a person who I need that time at night to sit and read a book or watch a TV show, or when our kids were here to do stuff with the kids, I need that time to recharge. And that's how I recharge. And, you know, Jay recharges by being alone. So having the kids around and doing all that wasn't recharging for him. And so I think it is just your personality. But I don't know, you know, it's going to be different for every person, but continually talking about it, you know, when you come home from work and your spouse says, how was your day? Say, okay, I'm going to tell you how my day was, instead of just saying, oh, it was good, because it probably wasn't, or you've got something that you need to say to get off your chest, because your spouse really, I mean, if you can understand what went on during their day, then you can understand how they're going to react with your family that night and with your children. You know, okay, you've had a bad day, I'll take care of giving the kids a bath tonight, you know, whatever that might be. Again, it all comes back to communication and being in that relationship where you can communicate with each other about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
So the other alternative you said was bringing the actual papers home and the spreadsheets or the computer. And probably what has happened in your world, if that's you, is that you excelled at a particular project and you shined a little bit in front of your boss. And so your boss, being human, is saying, okay, well, what more can I get out of this person? And what more can I get out of this person? And what more can I get out of this person? Sometimes to, you know, have a half an hour's worth of homework to do at the kitchen table once the kids are in bed and before I spend some time with my wife. If you've talked about that, that's okay. The one that scares me is when you start seeing the computers in the bedroom and they're working on it till all hours of the night. On the other hand, Bill, you're an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
You're entrepreneurs. And when you're an entrepreneur, if you're not hustling, you're sinking. You know, I mean, it's a constant hustle. And so balancing all that is so difficult. And again, I think you've got to have strong communication with your spouse and strong expectations and boundaries that we can't set for you. We can't say, here, do X, Y, Z, because every marriage is different.
Every personality is different.
And every work situation is different.
For a lot of years when we were first married, I was working full-time at a television station. I was hosting a daily sports talk radio show. I would leave the station and drive directly to the studio. I was on Thursdays, I was hosting the coaches show for a college football team that I was broadcasting for. On Fridays, I would do high school football games. And on Saturdays, I would do the college football games for that same university. And about this time of year, which is the beginning of November, I would completely lose my voice. I would be completely wiped out. And I would also discover that I hadn't really spent a whole lot of time with that person that I presumably loved, right? And you talk about, as we did it in last week's episode, we talk about the 5 love languages. Quality time was a fantasy. It was not even close to being reality, because when you're working through all of those things, you're chasing this imaginary something. As Solomon says, I chased everything under the sun and found that it was all meaningless. And I don't know if it just takes years to learn that the hard way, even though very wise people would tell me, Billy, you're going too hard. I was on this journey where I was going to sprint to a major network gig, and I was going to be the next Jim Nance, and Jay Laffoon would call me for Masters tickets because I would be handing them out like the tooth fairies, throwing candy around at the parade. And after a while, you start to realize, and I'm a slow learner, so it probably took me longer than it would for others. You start to realize, not only do I not need to do all these things, I don't really want to do all these things. And I had to begin to develop the ability to say no.
Powerful word.
When you're being invited to do things, especially if it's in the path of your career that you really feel like you're equipped for and called to, it is hard to say no. And you guys, I'm sure, have experienced that as well, where people are saying, we'd like you to come to this conference. We want you to come over here, do 2 sessions here, then get on the plane, then go over here, then come to this. And it sounds really good because everybody wants a piece of me. I must be so important. They couldn't do this without me. and at some point, you've got to come to the light bulb moment where you go, this is not what's best for me. I'm not, and by the way, listeners, I'm not advocating you don't work. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, if you're going to keep your marriage as a priority, there will come moments when you just have to politely decline the invitations that probably come the way of a talented person, a person who's made themselves available, perhaps positioned you as an expert in your field. It can be very tempting to just say, I would love to. And all of a sudden you're on the road for 180 nights a year, and it's miserable.
It's interesting because I've got a friend who's a multimillionaire, but refuses to retire, refuses to quit work. And I said to him, this was now 20 years ago. I said, how much is enough? You just sold your company for an unbelievable amount of money. And he said, I have a number in mind. When I hit that number, that's when I'll be, and it's just, and whether it's having a number or having the, like you said, 180 days on the road, because that's how popular I am, or having your own, whatever show that millions of people watch, whatever it is, success in your field. As you said, Solomon so aptly put it, it is all vain. It's vanity. Everything is vanity. And I think we lose, God created us to be in relationship, to be in relationship with him, clearly, but to be in relationship with others, and that blessed relationship of a husband and wife. And you've all experienced it, our listeners. I know you have. It's only been moments, because it's only moments for Laura and I. We don't have a lifetime of connecting and no. Every once in a while we go, gee, we just got that right. Oh, and now we've got it wrong again. Because that's how life is. But it is those moments that, you will sit on your deathbed and reminisce about the people that you were blessed to be around and influenced by, and certainly your spouse is the greatest gift that God's given you. And so when you sacrifice that at the altar of vanity, you really lose.
But I do think it is something that we mature into. When you mature into
I'll let you know when I get there.
When you mature into it, it's going to be different for every person. Again, based on personalities and circumstances. But yeah, it's something you mature into, where you realize that the people in your life are more important than the experiences. And when I say experiences, the accolades, I got this trophy and I got that trophy and I got this acknowledgement and I got that acknowledgement. And, people are more important, and the people closest to you, those relationships are where you want to spend your influence. And, the work that we have to do is a necessity of survival, I guess, would be the best way to
That's our curse. I mean, clearly, but yet there's value in work.
It's your curse.
Yeah, but what are we doing for the couple listening right now who now realize that they've got it out of balance? It's not right. They specifically went and searched for this topic. They did a Google search. They ended up on the website. They ended up on Apple Podcasts for these three strangers to talk to them about work and marriage balance. And now they are fully understanding, man, we got this all backwards. What's the pathway to setting it right?
I think you've got to hit the pause button. You've got to hit the pause button and plan at least one overnight, perhaps a whole weekend. Get the kids taken care of, whatever you need to do, but get out of the house and
take paper and pencil with you
and just start talking about all these things. It doesn't have to be some big emotional thing. It doesn't have to be a cry fest. What it needs to be is just let's shuck it down to the cob and be honest with each other of how things are going.
And I would say start, and I say pencil and paper, because if you take your computers and you're going to take it all in there, then you get distracted by the online, so take pencil and paper and start by writing down everything in your life that you have to do. You have to take care of your children. You have to go to work every day. We have to make our marriage a relation, write down all the stuff that is a non-negotiable, and then write down all the stuff that's
negotiable,
the stuff that maybe you enjoy, you know, but it's not a necessity. And some of that's gonna involve your kid, you know, especially if you have kids who are involved in everything, you know, there's gonna be, well, Joey has 5 different things and Sally has 10 different things she's involved in. That's way too much. That's causing an imbalance. You know, so write down, this is what's non-negotiable, this is what's negotiable, and figure out what can be paused, to use Jay's word. One of the things that we do in our coaching program is we take couples through that very process of
We deconstruct their
yeah,
marriage.
we deconstruct everything in their marriage right now, and then we build it back up using the things that are most important to them, the core values that are most important to them as individuals and as a couple. And they come out of that with a mission statement that allows them to say yes to what needs to be said yes to, and no to what needs to be said no to.
So
And that leads you over into an examination of the debt that perhaps you've incurred, the purchases that you're making, and how you prioritize those. But then it ends up propelling you into this cycle where I got to work because I got to pay for all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
well, I mean, if you can't take a pause, you know, you say, Jay, Laura, Bill, that's not in our DNA. We'll go away for the weekend and we'll end up sleeping in, and we'll go out for dinner, and we'll go to a movie, but we won't do the work. Then I would suggest finding a coach.
Mm-hmm.
We believe this. Not every marriage needs counseling, but every marriage needs a coach. You look at the greatest athletes of all time. Every one of them had a coach they relied on, had a coach that helped them understand the fundamentals better, that gave them drills to work on the fundamentals better. And we're not tooting our own horn here because there's tons and tons of really good coaches out there. If you don't want to do a personalized coaching, you know, where you're having to bare your soul in front of other people. For example, we have an online version that you can go through our coaching program online, but you've got to do something, right? You've got to do something, because if you do nothing, it will just stay the same. You know, the only way to change a trajectory is to impact the trajectory that you're on.
In a culture that's as busy as ours is, with the pressure coming down from a consumeristic society, where you've got to have this one, you've got to go and get this product, you better be driving this, you've got to have this phone, you got to. The pressure on the breadwinners and families is immense unless the boundaries have been set ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Where, hey, listen, I understand that the neighbor kids all have this. Here's what they don't have. They don't have Thursday nights together as family game night.
Right.
Right.
No, you think that sounds as corny as can be, but if you ever got a chance to ask your friends, that's the reason they keep coming over to our house.
Right.
Right. So there's some of those things that are price tag resistant, that are so important and can be swallowed up really quickly in this age of you better go and get it, especially as we're all talking right before the holidays. Of course, this is that time of year when stuff takes priority over the things that actually last. And it can be really overwhelming, to say the least. This is probably when the work marriage imbalance becomes its most tense. Because if we're going to go and get these 19 gifts on the list for Junior, then we're going to have to do a little extra work, or else we're going to be paying the Visa bill.
Right. Actually, the tension comes in January when the Visa bill comes due.
Yeah. And it's this cycle that just keeps going and going with interest. It just keeps going and going. So I love the suggestion that you guys gave about the coaching idea. Can you close us out with a little more guidance on how somebody listening can actually take advantage of that opportunity through jayandlaura.com?
Absolutely. They go to jayandlaura.com, and right there in our header says coaching. And they can click on it. It will take them to a page where they have 3 options. They're going to click on the online on demand, and then they can either do that at their convenience, or they can choose an option where they would actually do a 6-week Zoom call with Jay and I, where we would take them through the process. So they can either do it on their own, or they can have Jay and I do that with them.
Clearly, that is something that's needed. And Jay, you're right. Every successful athlete, most successful musicians have a coach or an instructor at some point along the way. Ellen and I had coaching as well, and it's very, very helpful. It helps you see things from a perspective that you're not going to get when it's just the two of you looking at each other. Sometimes it's good to have an arbiter come in from the outside and say, let me see if I can lend some insight here.
And maybe you can remember, I can't remember the name of it, but C.S. Lewis, arguably one of the greatest writers that ever penned a book. He had a group of writers that he got together with. I can't remember the name of it, but it was C.S. Lewis and it was Tolkien and Lewis, and it was all these great writers because they got together and they coached each other, they helped each other, they ran together. And if nothing else, maybe find another couple that doesn't want to fall into this and have coffee with them once, so we can call it therapy, for crying out loud. It's cheaper than real therapy, but yet you can help each other stay accountable.
But we also have that option too on our coaching, that if you have a group of friends that you want to do it together, then we can do that as well. So
yeah.
Very good. Again, jayandlaura.com and marriagetalk.org, the two websites we'd ask you to remember as we wrap up our time here today. And please don't allow the work and marriage imbalance to become your story. There is hope for all. And it just takes some effort. It will take some insight and perhaps even some coaching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again next week on another episode of Marriage Talk.